Today we're in Chapter 3, Section 3, and what we're going to be talking about is the rise of the big businesses during the age of the Gilded Age. So the first thing I want to talk about is the perception that we have. Perception is how we see things. And I'll give you a couple examples to start off with. You either see, what do you see? You either see one person, one character of Wolverine, or else a face of Wolverine looking at another face of Wolverine. How about this one? Here you either see a duck or a bunny rabbit. How about this one? Here you either see the face of an old man or the side complexion of a female with a hat on. It's about how we see things and what we want to look at to determine whether this period of time was either good or bad and why. So what do the workers in this image here on the screen have in common? The first thing is they're all women. So I want you to ask this question as we go through this. Why might the factory managers want to hire women during the period of time that we're talking about, post-Civil War up into the 1915 era? So what is Gild? When we're talking about the Gilded Age, the Gild is to give an often deceptively attractive or improved appearance to, or to cover with, or with a thin layer of gold. The Gilded Age, in some places, you could look at it from it being one of the greatest times in American history, when we talk about the advancements that we have in business and society. But from the other perspective, there's a lot of things that are happening behind the boat, behind the scene, that show that things weren't always as good as they appeared, and we had to fight for a lot of rights in order to accomplish what we needed to have. So in the 1870s to 1900s, the term was coined by the author Mark Twain and described the era of fabulous wealth, which masked some of the problems, such as corruption and poverty, that we're going to see and discuss through this section, Section 3, and then also into Section 4. So we have to look back from the concept that we've talked about for the last chapter, which was Manifest Destiny, and that was where the United States had to grow into what it was, and we wanted to have a giant country connected. We had to industrialize in order to make these things happen. So the three things that we needed to do in order to industrialize was going to be land. So we talked already before about the opening of the West, which led to the increased availability of resources, and we used the railroad to ship these resources across the way. We also needed labor. We needed workers that was met by population growth between the 1860s and the 1890s, which, again, we've talked about before because the population is going to double. We have the resources. We have the people. And now, finally, we're going to need the loot, the money, the capital. Manufactured goods, or money for investment, used to make the other goods and services to keep advancing and keep industrializing our society to try to catch up with and then eventually pass countries of Europe. So what do we need, or what do we have, what do we need, and how we're going to get it? In the last section, Section 2, we talked about railroads as the key to growth across the country, creating this infrastructure, this webbing that is able to bring things from place to place. The railroad boom benefited because we had raw materials that we were able to get to factories. Manufactured goods and products, we were able to take them to markets. We're able to provide jobs in steel and lumber, and miners and laborers. Cities are going to grow and communication is going to improve. Again, we talked about in the first two sections how those advancements in technology are really changing the way we live as a society. There are many improvements that we see during this time. Consolidation in businesses, combining separate railroad companies into larger ones. Large railroad companies often force smaller ones out of business. We have a standard gauge, or the width of the railroad track, which was 4 foot 5 inches. It was adopted, allowing the faster shipment of goods and reduced prices. The result overall was a lower cost, and there was no more loading and unloading of goods into different trains. The technology, air brakes from George Westinghouse. The Janney car coupler, invented by Eli J. Janney. Refrigerated cars by Gustav Swift, and the Pullman sleeping car developed by George M. Pullman. Unfortunately, what you see here is, and we talked about in the last section again, there's a lot of abuses and corruptions. There's going to be a rate war, which leads to so much competition it caused the railroads to cut the fares. There's also rebates, which are secret discounts to large customers. and pools, where several railroads would divide up the business in an area to help fix the prices, to keep the prices up higher and affect the average consumer. But again, the net profit was being reinvested into the growth at first. There are going to be many laws that are passed, but unfortunately they're not going to be enforced. This is going to have effect on farmers. The results of the rebates and the pools, it's going to be bad for farmers. And they're going to create something called the Populist Party in order to try to fight back against the corruption that they see that it's going to affect their income. The positives of this time, again, the steel, lumber, miners, railroad workers, they were going to build and operate, open every corner to settlement and growth and new businesses and new towns. So, again, to review, having the new land, having the new labor, having all the capital make goods is going to change the way the population looks and how we see things. There's also going to be a new way of doing businesses, and this is where we're going to get really into the meat and potatoes of section or lesson 3. There's going to be a formation of corporations, and these are businesses that are owned by investors who buy a portion of a company through shares of stock in hopes of earning dividends, which is money. Investors or shareholders have little risk. Few laws limit corporations. We're also going to see the terminology economies of scale. The cost of manufacturing is decreased by producing goods quickly and in larger quantities, meaning that the faster we produce it, the quicker we produce it, the more intelligently we produce it, it's going to lower the cost and help raise the profit for a few people. In the book, they're going to talk about vertical integration, which is controlling all aspects of production from raw materials to a finished product. The example is going to be Andrew Carnegie, which we're going to watch a small documentary about. You're also going to have horizontal integration, which is the purchase of all competing companies in that same industry. And we'll be talking about that through a documentary on Rockefeller. Both of these things are going to be beneficial at first to the businesses, but what you're going to see is as time goes by, we start to create things called monopolies. And these are things that we can't have because they're going to control the costs and control the prices, which is going to have a negative effect on the average American and the average worker. So again, these are the pictures I just showed you from the images. During the 1800s, vertical and horizontal integration helped businesses to grow into monopolies. On the left side is this vertical integration where if you purchase the companies at all levels of production, you can control all of your costs. So if I want to try to make a hamburger, instead of having to go to a farmer to buy it from a meat market, I'm going to actually have the cow on my property. I'm going to have somebody there to slaughter it for me so that I can control all the costs, and every aspect of the production is going to be controlled by me, so therefore I make all the profit. The bottom line just comes back to me. Horizontal integration is when you purchase the competing companies in that same industry. So that would be like, if I owned a grocery store and I decided I want to buy all the grocery stores out in the area, that means there's no other competition. So all the prices are going to be controlled because unless they want to drive far away, they're going to have to come to one of my grocery stores. And that's what you're going to see, the creation of these ideas of monopolies. In this example, we'll talk about Standard Oil, which is going to become the first monopoly that we really need to crush. So the new industries that are out there. The causes, 1850s research found that they could burn petroleum to produce heat and smoke-free light, and the effects was oil became valuable. This led to the growth of a new industry. So oil had to be refined before it was used, and in 1859, Edwin Drake drilled the first oil well in Titusville, Pennsylvania, which we've talked about before. Here is, again, an image of the first well in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and then I also put a map here to put perspective of where we are, down here in the yellow, and our location in proximity to Titusville, where we're going to have the discovery of that idea. So oil itself, not as critical as what we're talking about early, but it's going to be there in this whole idea of big businesses because it's going to create an infrastructure of change, and we're going to figure out how quickly we as a society have to change. Can we embrace the good parts with the bad parts? Will this make the American worker, the average American, happier or less happy? And that's the whole concept of what we're going through with the Gilded Age, is what is this doing, and is it making people's lives better or not?